welcome to the Coding Channel. Today is the 11th episode of our Python tutorial series for beginners. And in this episode, we are going to talk about the for loops in Python. Listen more when we come back. Now, Python has two primitive loop commands. When I say primitive, these are built-in commands. Besides the while loops that we just introduced in our previous episodes, Python also uses the what we call a for loop. Now, the for statement in Python differs a bit from what you may be used to in a C or Pascal. Rather than always iterating over an arithmetic progression of numbers just like in Pascal, or giving the user the ability to define both the iteration and the halting condition just like in C, Python for statement iterates over the items of any sequence. When I say sequence, these are numbers, it could be a string, it could be list, tuple, or any other iterable objects in the order that they appear in the sequence. Now, in this episode, we will be using a for loop for numbers and strings. And the list, the tuples, and other iterable objects, we will discuss this in our next episodes. Now, if you want to learn the syntax of a for loop in Python, as well as on how to use the for loop in Python, let's get started. Now in Python, if you want to iterate over a sequence of numbers, aside from the keywords for and then in, we will be using the built-in function range. Now to begin, you just have to type the for keyword followed by the variable, for example, index. So you can choose any index, in any variable that you want. And then followed by the in keyword and then the range function. Now inside of the parentheses, or the argument of a range, you can specify here how many times you want to iterate. Let's say, for example, 3 times. And then just have to put a colon. Now, unlike in other programming languages, like for example in Java and C++, you can actually have a for loop without without any statement inside. So, and you can run it successfully. But in Python, you cannot do that. You cannot have a for loop that is empty. So to prevent that from happening, let's say, for example, you're just thinking of the statements that you would like to include in your for loop. So while thinking and you want to run your program successfully, you just need to use the pass statement. Okay, so with this, even if you don't have actually an output, but if you're going to run the program, so it will run successfully. Okay, so just use the pass keyword if you just want to have a loop with no content, or meaning empty. Okay, so I'll just have to put this one in comment to try another example. Okay, now so let's just continue. So after the for statements, let's say you want to print out irandon 3 times. Okay, so you just have to use the print function and then followed by the name, for example, or string irandon. We're going to run this. As you can see, we have now the 3 lines of output. Okay, because of the range that we specify here. Okay, so aside from that, again, I just have to put this in comment. Okay, so what if, for example, we need to print Laureta, and then if you remember the use of and a parameter, and then you just put a space, so instead of having 3 lines, so we can print Laureta, let's say 3 times also, but all in 1 line. So let's just try to run this one, and then as you can see, if you're going to increase the width of our output tab here, so as we have now Laureta, 3 Laureta name in 1 line. Okay, so that's it. Aside from that, let's say for example, we can also use the this type of an output statement. So for example, we want to display a j, the name j, and then followed by the index. Okay, the index variable. What do you think is the output? Okay, if we're going to use that, use this two parameters, as you can see, the value of index starts from 0. Okay, so by default, um, the variable normally, okay, the value of the variable starts from index 0. So 0, 1, 2. So meaning when you specify 3 here, okay, it will iterate 3 times, but the value of index is starting from 0, 1, or 2. Now, we can also modify this one if you want to start from index 1. Okay, so let's try another example. So if you want to modify the index number, for example, we have Austin. So print if we want to print out Austin, and then we want to start from index number 1. So here's now the output. So we now have 1, 2, and then 3. Okay, so that's how we do it with range function. Okay, now I just want to show you another output statements that we can use inside of the for loop. So let's say, for example, I just want to display Bobby's, and then the second argument or parameter, I have here the index plus 1, okay? And we can, another parameter is the expression. So we have index plus 1, then multiplied by the this string, okay, the vertical string. So we can also insert an expression inside of the output statement, okay, and then we'll see what will happen. Okay, so that's it. We have the expression here, okay. For example, we have 1 times 1 string, so we have one vertical line here, and then for the second iteration, we now have 2 and then 3. Okay, so that's it. Next, for example, another output statement with 3 arguments, but this time, for example, we want to display Jock Sarmiento. Okay, shout out to you, bro. My my new subscriber. Welcome to the coding channel. Okay, so we have 3 parameters here: the string to be displayed, and then, for example, the value of the index that we modify. We want to start from 1, and we have the end parameter. So if we're going to run, we will display the Jock Sarmiento all in one line. Okay, so that's it. Okay, another example that I prepare is a for loop having like this. So let me just comment this one first. Okay, so this time we have a for loop or for a statement having two parameters in our range function. Okay, now so what does it mean? If we put two parameters here, the first parameter is the starting index, and then the 5 here is now the stop index. Okay, so for example, we will print out Juan Lim, and then we will use the counter variable here. Observe the output. Okay, as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so why 4? Why not 5 lines? We are expecting 5 lines here. Okay, because if we're going to use the two parameters of range functions, okay, and then we modify the start index, since we did not include the first index, which is the 0 index, so the output is only 4. So meaning not including 5, because supposed to be this one is 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay, just to have a 5 output. But since we modify, so we only have 4. So if you want to have, for example, 5 lines of output here, so you have to modify this one, make it a 6. Okay, and if, so that the output is, well, okay, Juan Lim 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so that's it. Next, we have another example. A range function, this time with 3 arguments. Okay, so in our first example, we only have a range function with 1 argument, with the 2 arguments, and this time with the 3 arguments. So what does it mean? Okay, the first argument, if we have the 3 arguments now, is the starting index, followed by the stop index as the second uh, parameter, and the step index or the increment. Okay, meaning if you want to increment by 2, okay. So for you to better understand that, so let's try to add this output statement. For example, you want to display the even numbers, okay, and you want to start from 2, from index number 2, okay. So it's like even numbers from 2 to 10. So and then you have an increment here by 2. So that's why the output is 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so that's it. That's the meaning of having the 3 arguments of range function. Okay, another, we can also loop through a string in Python. Okay, so that's why the for loop here has a lot of ways that we can use. Okay, now in this example, for letter in apple, so meaning for each letter in apple, so letter is a variable. Okay, any variable, again, you can you can use any variable name. Okay, so if you're going to read these statements for each letter in apple, okay, print, for example, print the letter, the letter variable. What do you think is the output? If you're going to run, okay, so as you can see, it prints out all the letters in apple. So we have A-P-P-L-E. Okay, now you can also use the version of an output statement having 2 arguments. For example, we have the string letter and then letter. So if you're going to run that one, so we have letter A, letter P, letter P, letter L, and letter E. Okay, because these are the letters in Apple Word. Okay, another letter with an end parameter. So that we can display the letter, I mean the Apple string, all in one line. Now, just like while in Python, we can also use the else keyword in a for loop to specify a block of code to be executed when the loop is finished. Okay, now, but before that, let me just have a program. Let's try to create a program, a simple program. Let's say we want to prompt the user to enter 5 numbers, and then we will just add those numbers, okay, and display the sum. Okay, so how are we going to do that? This time using for loop. Okay, it's very simple here. Just have to use the for keyword, and then again, for example, I will be using x variable. So for x in range. Okay, so we will now apply what we have learned in our lesson a while ago using about range. No? So for x in range, and then I will be using 2 arguments here. Okay, 1 and 6. So what does it mean now? It only means that I want to prompt, for example, the user to enter number 1, number 2, for number 3, for number 4, and for number 5, not including 6. Okay, and then the next statement inside of my for loop is the input statement. How are we going to do that? Okay, very simple again. You just have to use, for example, number. Okay, number variable, and then the int keyword, because you know that already, that we want to convert the input from string to integer, and then we will just prompt the user to enter a number. For example, enter number, and then I will be using the x so that every iteration it will print out enter number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. So again, the x here is an integer. We will cast this or convert this to string. Okay, and then another string concatenation, I want to add a colon. Okay, so that's it. That's an input statement already. If we're going to run, okay, we now have enter number 1, 7, 8, 6, 5, and then 4. Okay, so that's it. So as you can see, it's a very easy compared to while. We've used while, we have an initialization, we have the condition, we have the increment, and here we only have 2 lines. Okay, so that's a very simple here. We're using for loop. Okay, but of course, a while has um, other capabilities. Okay, let's continue. So after the input statement, of course, we need to add. So we will be using, for example, sum variable. So if you're going to use the sum for string concatenation, make sure that that variable has an initial value first. Okay, and then sum, for example, plus equals, and then number. So again, this one means sum is equal to sum plus the value of number. And then after that, okay, so uh, after the user have entered, for example, for number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so the for loop now ends. So it's about time to display the output. So the also the time to use the right time to use the else keyword here, just like in while. Okay, we use else in while, and then Python execute the else statement once the condition of while is already false. So the same thing here. Okay, in using for loop. Okay, once the iteration already finished, so we can insert the else statement here, so that Python will execute this when this for statements already finished. Okay, finish the iteration. Okay, so we have now else, and we will print out the string, for example, the sum is, and then the sum. Okay, that's it. For example, we have 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So 15. 5 plus 4, 9 plus 3, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we have 15. Okay, so that's how we use the for else statements. Now, what about continue, for example? Okay, so for example, after we prompt the user to enter a number, we will insert here an if statement. Okay, and then for example, if a number is equal to 5. Okay, so once the user have entered 5, we will just include here continue. What does it mean? We're going to run. Okay, for example, for the first input, we have 8, and then we have now 5 as the second input. So as you can see, it will just continue to prompt the user for another number, for number 3. Okay, so for example, I entered 3, and then another 5, and then, for example, 2. Okay, and then what do you think is the difference now using continue with an if statements here? Okay, the sum is 13. Okay, take note, we have two 5 numbers here. Okay, so the result is 13. So 8 plus 3, 8, 9, 10, 11 plus 2 is 13. So meaning, since we have a continue here, uh, during the execution, Python, if we have the continue, meaning we skip that current iteration and then we move to next. So there is one statement that Python did not execute, and that is the assignment statement in line number 10. If the input is 5. So that's how we use the continue keyword. Okay, now aside from that, we can also use the break keyword here, just like what we did inside of the while. Okay, for instance, I just have to add here ELIF number is equal to -1. If the user have entered -1, and then you specify a break statement here, okay, so what do you think will happen if we enter -1? If we're going to run, okay, another 7, we have a 6, we have a 5, we have 5, we have 4. Okay, the sum is 17. Why 17? Take note, we have continue now and a break. So we have 7 plus 6, we have 13 plus 4, 17. So Python ignores this two iterations having 5 inputs. Okay, so that's because of a continue. Okay, let's try this time using a break. Okay, and continue. So again, 7, and then 5, and then 5, and then -1. Okay, so what have you noticed? Using break, we did not finish the iteration. okay, we break out of the loop, of the for loop, and take note what happened to the else statements. Okay, so same with the break statements that we've used inside of the while loop. Okay, if you're going to use the break inside of the for loop, the Python will ignore the statement inside of the else. So it's the same thing. Okay, what we did in while. Okay, the break statements in while and the break statements inside of the for loop. Because take note, with a break, okay, with break, so we will go out of that loop and we will not execute the else statements because the condition is still true. We're not yet done. We're not yet finished. Okay, same thing with while. Okay, since the while is still true, but we break out of the loop, so we did not execute the else statement. Okay, so in other words, we will just execute the else statement if and only if what? The condition is already false. Okay, so by having the break statements, so that's why we failed. We did not execute the else. Okay, now let's talk about the nested for loops in Python. Now, when we say nested again, it's a loop inside a loop. Okay, so we have the outer loop and we have the inner loop. Now, the inner loop will be executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop. So let's take a look at this example. For in the first row, we have 0, 0, 0, second row, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 2, 2, 2, 2. Just like what we did in our previous episode using the nested while. So I will show you now the version of a nested for loop. So for instance, we have 4 and then row in range. Okay, how many how many rows we have? So we have 3. Okay, and then that's the outer loop. So the inner loop, we have another 4. Let's talk about column this time. And then in range, how many columns are there in each row? So we have also 3. So uh, that's it. And then we will just print out the what? Print out the, for example, 0, 0, 0. So 0, 0, 0 meaning, okay, so we have the first row. So we will be using the row variable here. Okay, so row, and then we will use the end parameter with the space, so that during the first iteration, okay, we have the row, the initial value of row is 0, and then call is 0. Okay, 0. So this one will iterate 0 with index 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so but since we've used the row here, so the value of row is all 0 during the first iteration. And then after that, before we move on to another iteration, let's say now before we move on to the second iteration, okay, so we will print out the new line. Okay, that's it. If we're going to run this one, the output is 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. Okay, now in the event that we use, instead of row, we use a call there, so we will have a different output. It's a 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, because this one depends on the values of call. Okay, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So every row. Okay. Now let us have another example here. Okay, for example, we have another pattern 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so we have a for loop again. And then, okay, we have for row in range, for example, still 3. And then for call in range, since we have now the 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, so we will not use a 3 here, but instead we will use the variable row here, and then we will just add 1. What does it mean now? So for instance, if the value of row is 0 during the first iteration, so we will go to the inner loop, right? So call, the initial value is 0. So 0 to 0 plus 1, so 1. So meaning 0 to 1. Okay, so we will print out the um, the value of call. So, for example, a print call, and then we have the end, another here. Okay, so 0. So index 0, right? We will print the index 0 because the range is only 1. Okay, so that's in index 0. And then if the value of call is 1, so that is a false, so out, okay, meaning exit in the inner loop. And then before we go up again for the second iteration, so we will add here the print statement. Okay, so if the value of row is 1, so call will go back to 0, and then this one 1 plus 1 is 2, so we have not, that's why we have a 0 and then 1. Okay, and the next iteration 0 1 2. So let's try. We're going to run. So we now have 0 0 1 0 1 2. Okay, again, what if we use a row variable here? Okay, what do you think is the output? We're going to use the row there, so we will have 0 1 1 2 2 and 2. Okay, so that's how we uh, use the for loop, the nested for loop in Python. Now at this point, let's have a programming exercise. Okay, write a Python program that will prompt the user to enter 10 integers and determine the odd and even numbers of the 10 integers input. Then print also the number of times the user have entered even and odd numbers. Okay, so I will give you 5 minutes to answer this. So you get your laptop, you turn on your computer, and then try to solve this problem. Okay, by applying the skills that you have learned a while ago in our examples. And then after that, you compare your answer to my answer. Okay, let's start. So let's prompt the user to enter 10 integers using a for loop. So for example, x in range 1 11, right? Because you start from 1, then up to, and then you, number 1, number 2, number 3 up to number 10, not including 11. And then for example, we have n is equal to int input enter number sorry plus x str. Okay, convert that one, enter number 1. Okay, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 up to number 10. And then every iteration, so we will compare. So if n, how do we know if that number is even or odd? So if we will divide the number, for example, to 2, and if the remainder is 0, so that means to say that number is an even number, right? So by applying the arithmetic operators available in Python, so if n, I will use the percent sign is equal, percent sign mod 2, okay, percent 2. If it's equal to 0, if the remainder is 0, so meaning to say that number is even. So we will determine the odd and even numbers, and then we will also count. So I will be using even and then odd, and then I will just put an initial value there, both for even and odd. So for example, I have that number is even, so I will just concatenate that to even. So even is equal to even plus the new value of n, and then for example, just have to put a space there. Okay, that's a string concatenation. So n, okay, there's a space already. So let's try to have even is equal to the previous value of even plus n. And then I'll just have to put a double quote here. There's an error. It's because n is an integer, so we will convert this temporarily to string again. So I will be using the str there. Okay, so if n mod 2 is equal to 0, so I will assign that to my even number. Okay, I will put that number in my even variable, then space. And then, so if the, for example, if the remainder is not equal to 0, so else, meaning to say that one is an odd number. Okay, so plus equals and then str. For example, I will be using again that n plus that one. Okay, but take note, every time that we determine the that number, the input is an even number, we will also count that the number of times that the user have entered even, and the same with add. So aside from even add, so for example, I have even account here. Okay, or should I say like this one, even count is equal to let's say I have add account and then initialize this to both 0. Okay, so I will just have to add it here. So even plus equals 1, I mean even count. Okay, right, event count, sorry, event count, and then add add count. Okay, plus equals 1. So this just have to increment every time you assign that value to add or even. So that's it. And then we will now print. So we will have a for else here. Okay, aside from the if else, we will have a for else. Okay, so for, and then this time the else is under the for else. Okay, I will use this to print, for example, what the even numbers are. Display all the even numbers, right? So you put that inside of the even variable. Okay, and then for example, it's the same thing for the add. So the add numbers are, and then for example, I will just use add here. And for example, the okay, I will just have to put total even numbers, even numbers, even count. Okay, that's it. And then for the total add numbers, so I have the add count here. Okay, that's it. Let's try to run. We're running the wrong file. Wait, we just have to run this one and then run. Okay, enter number 1. So we have 8, 5, 4, 2, 3, 7. For example, 56, 43, 23, 12. Okay, let's try. So for numbers 8, 5, 4, 2, 3, 7, 56. So these are now the even numbers. 8, 4, 8, 4, 2, 56, and we have 12. And then total even numbers 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What about the odd numbers? We have 5, 3, 5, 3, 7, 43, and 23, and also 5. So that's it. So is your answer also correct, or is your code the same as mine? So comment down below if you also have the same code just like what I did here. And that's all for today. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And as always, show your love through comments and favorites. God bless and thank you for watching.